Okay, and we're back. This time we're reviewing the Man-at-Arms for Darkest Dungeon. We're going to talk about things like his stats, his skills, his camp skills, his resistances, and just his partners and trinkets, and basically everything about him in the Darkest Dungeon. Um, let's start with his stats. Be this. So, all right. So here are his stats. You can see right here I've extracted the Man-at-Arms, and he's being compared to the averages of all the characters. These are max level stats. Um, and here's the Man-at-Arms in terms of, actually, no, let's rank by HP, right? So this is the Man-at-Arms. And let's go through each stat one by one. We see that he has a above average HP, actually very above average. It's one of the 3 highest in the game. He's actually third. He's got an about average dodge, a slightly, this is below average. I wouldn't even say slightly. This is below average speed. He's tied for third slowest in the game. So this is a big concern for us because slow characters have some issues. So his crit is below average, so you can see it's like about 1.5 below average. And his damage is only just slightly below average. And that's pretty good, because it means he can actually step up to being a damage dealer, potentially, if you do need one. He's got a slightly above average stun resist, which is very good because he's a guarder. And guarders, when they get stunned, they drop their guard, and you don't want those guards to drop when you're using the guard. You definitely don't want it to drop. So having a good stun resist is very important for him, and he does have an okay one at least. He's got below average stun resist, just about average disease resist, above average move resist. Um, of note, as one of the highest bleed resist characters in the game, that's very good. Debuff resist is average, trap disarm is average, forward and back 2. Forward and back 2 is very good for him because he works in any of the front 3 positions, so 1, 2, and 3. He can function in 4, but it's not anywhere close to my favorite to use him in position 4. He loses access to a lot of his moves, and we'll cover his skills later so you can see. Right. So what are these stats? Oh yeah. So being able to move forward 2 is very good because he can move, if he gets shuffled into position 4, he can move forward into a position where he can do everything, which is position 2. And if for some reason you need to shuffle people back into their positions to bring them forward, you can move him from positions 1 to position 3. There's a lot of flexibility in having him help reposition people in that sense. So what do these stats tell us, right? So these stats tell us he's a very durable character, very very durable because he has a good stat spread between HP and dodge. Having higher HP and having lower dodge is very very good of a stat spread, mainly because developers have tended to buff kind of balance the fact that you have high dodge with having lower HPs, and dodge being an unreliable stat to work with most of the time is not very desirable to have a lot of, especially in exchange for the much more consistent defensive stat of HP. So having a higher HP is very good. These guys are generally considered pretty frail, so Man-at-Arms being the direct opposite of them in terms of stat spread should be considered pretty durable. He's also got pretty good bleed resist, so that means he resists one of the 2 dots very well, and he's got like an okay bearable other dot resist, which ends up making him very durable just overall. His crit rate is pretty low, and his damage range is only slightly below average, which means he's not very good at damage dealing, like compared to a lot of other characters. For example, like the Crusader or the Hellion or the Shield Breaker, where she's over here. But he can step up to the plate, and he does have good reach when we cover his skills to do that. Other Man-at-Arms skills, we're gonna go through them one by one. This is my optimal layout for him in terms of his skills, and we're gonna talk about why. Okay. So his first skill is Crush. It's a skill that can only be launched from positions 1 and 2, and can hit the enemy ranks of 1 to 3. And it's got one of the lower accuracies in the game at 105, and a +9 crit mod. +9 is actually a pretty good crit mod. It's pretty high. It brings him up to critting about 15% of the time, so 6 plus 9 is about 15, which means he crits about 1 every 6 moves. He crits about 1 every 6 times he uses this, and that's pretty good for a unit that's not really a damage dealer. Considering that, at least that means stress heals at the end of the day. The same crit mod. Oh yeah, so this is a good skill. Mainly, this is a good skill for damage dealing, though, because it can reach into rank 3. And rank 3 enemies tend to be frailer, and so you don't have to put as much damage into them. It's still nice to have a lot more damage, though, but you don't have to put as much damage in them, which means Man-at-Arms can at least help with rank 3. And that's very important for him, because it does increase his viability by a lot. That the fact that Crush can reach into rank 3. His other skill is Rampart. It's his stun. It's one of his best skills. It can be launched from the first 3 ranks and can hit the opponent's first 2 ranks. It has a lot of things that I want in a stun. It doesn't target rank 3, which is quote unquote its like only weakness. But it has a very good accuracy at 110. That's very, very high. I like my stuns landing. And it has a stun chance of 140%, which is average. It's actually the lowest one is 130%, and the highest one is 150%. So really, 140% is okay. It's only 10% less than the highest stuns in the game. So it's not that bad. So I like my stuns landing, obviously, and I like my stuns rolling to be able to stun the enemies, and this is what Rampart does. It also has a very good crit mod at 9%, just the same as Crush that we covered a few seconds ago, which means it'll crit a decent amount of the time, and you'll get a stress heal off of it, and that's pretty good. And when it does crit, you'll be able to deal a good chunk of damage to whatever you need to deal, like the front 2 ranks, which is not as like important because you can stall off of those guys, but it's a stress heal at the end of the day, which is okay. As a trade-off. It's got a negative 60 damage mod, which is actually a pretty heavy damage mod, but let's see. Let's do some quick math. How much does that make? How much does that mean Rampart does? 60%. So it's 0.4. So that's 3. So that's 4 to like, why can't I do math? 4 to 9? 4 to 9. So Rampart ends up dealing 4 to 9 to enemies, and that's a respectable amount. Nothing too crazy. You're not really depleting the enemy's health that rapidly. The enemy frontliner's health that rapidly, which is good, because you want to heal off of those guys. The other important part about it that a lot of people overlook is knockback 1. So what that means is, when you use Rampart, you are not only stunning a position 2 character, which is what I usually use it on. I usually use it on the opponent's position 2 character. You're not only stunning them, but you're pushing them back, which means the position 3 character is being pushed forward. And a lot of position 3 characters in this game, if they're stress casters, they have a chance to use a weaker move that is not a stress cast in position 2. Which means Rampart can effectively pseudo-stun the rank 3 character at the same time. Characters that I'm thinking of are Bone Courtier. He will sometimes use Knife in the Dark, which is just a damaging move instead of the Cup of Wine that he's from the runes. The Drummer, actually no, the Drummer I don't know about off the top of my head, but there are damage dealers also that do not appreciate being pushed up into rank 2, like the Bone Arbalist in the runes, and the Fungal Artillery in the Wield. Yep, those are the ones that come to the top of my mind right away. But yeah, this is a good skill. It pseudo stuns too. It stuns at one actual and pseudo stuns the other. Bellow. Bellow is a very good move as well. It's probably one of the best debuffs in the game, mainly because you can spend 1 action on your Man-at-Arms to debuff 4 of the enemies. So you have traded 1 action on your team to weaken 4 enemies, and that's a pretty powerful thing to do. Let's get to what it does, right? So it has an accuracy of 110, which means it lands pretty often. And the debuffs have a 140% chance to apply, and they are -10 dodge and -7 speed. and crits received, which while marked, that's not that big of a deal. The most important thing to look at here is the -7 speed. In this game, initiative is determined. So initiative being the order in which you and your opponents go, like the order in which your units take their turns, is determined by a D8 roll, which is an 8-sided die. The 8-sided die plays a large component into who goes first and who goes last, or who goes before someone else. So being able to cancel out all of the rolls on your opponent's side and you retaining all of the rolls on your side is very, very powerful. It almost guarantees that almost all of your units will go before any of the enemy units, which is very good, because being able to go first means that you get to apply your damage first. It means you get to apply your stuns first. It means you get to apply your buffs to your team first. In the case of, like, if you're applying defensive buffs, like dodge buffs or whatever. So this is a very good utility move. It also does come with a -10 dodge, which does mean that you will hit the opponents more often. Now it is important to mention that these are two individual 140% chance rolls that roll against the target's debuff resist chance. The thing is, most enemies in this game actually don't have a very high debuff resist chance, so you can almost think of this skill as almost always landing on all 4 enemies. This is actually a skill that you can switch into sometimes. Maybe take off, like, Crush and put this on instead. But we'll talk about, like, what other sets I run. This is just the set I run most of the time. Defender. Defender is one of 3 guard abilities in the game. The 3 being Defender on the Man-at-Arms, Guard Dog on the Houndmaster, and the Antiquarian one, where she forces guard on one of her allies. And all 3 of these skills are very, very powerful in doing one thing. They're very, very powerful in making sure your characters don't die. It can be, okay, Defender itself can be launched from any of the first 4 ranks and can target any of it can be launched from any rank and target any rank on your team. So if someone is on Death's Door, for example, you would really love it if they weren't hit, right? And Defender can do that. So Guard, what that means is Guard, essentially what Guard means is, let's say you guard someone who's in position 2, and they get hit by an attack, right? Instead of that person in position 2 taking the attack, the Man-at-Arms will take the attack instead. So he kind of acts as a meat shield for your position 2 character, or any of your other characters that are on Death's Door that you don't want to get hit, or any of your characters that are getting low on HP. You can put a guard on them and kind of make sure they don't get hit, and the damage is more evenly spread out between Man-at-Arms and that character. So you can more evenly spread out the damage. But not only that, the Man-at-Arms actually applies a plus 30% protection buff to himself while he's guarding. So not only is he taking over the attacks of another unit, he's also lessening the damage that is being applied to that unit. But he's taking it, obviously. So he's just kind of soaking up damage. He's a damage sponge, is what I'm trying to say with Defender. This is a very powerful skill, and a lot of endgame content will actually check if you have a guard on your team. Things like V-Wolf will check if you have a guard on your team, and the Darkest Dungeon 2 bosses will check if you have a guard on your team. A lot of endgame content will just be able to hit you down to, like, low HP, where you would like to have a guard on your team to prevent that character from taking any further damage. Man-at-Arms is very powerful for this skill. Very powerful skills. Retribution is a riposte. It acts the same way as the Highwayman does, except it also marks the Man-at-Arms. And that's, I guess, my biggest problem with this. Oh, that's right. It can be launched from the first 3 ranks and hit the enemy's first 3 ranks. And it's got, like, a -75 damage mod, which means it barely does any damage when you use it. But it sets up the riposte status on your Man-at-Arms. Yeah, my main issue with it is that it marks the Man-at-Arms, which means enemies that benefit off of marks will start to hit the Man-at-Arms more often and harder. And that's my real problem. You don't want to mark yourself, because if you mark yourself, your Man-at-Arms gets focused, and not only that, he gets hit with bonus damage from mark benefiting enemies. And sure, you could say that being focused is very good for a post, getting a lot of value, but you'll then have to very emergency heal up your Man-at-Arms. Sometimes, like for example against spiders who could deal up to 21 with a single crit, versus a marked target. Just not a skill I would say to use pretty often. This is probably one of his worst skills. Still very good, still has applications, but just not in the top 6. So 7th is what I'm trying to say. Command is a buff, is a team-wide buff. It gives plus 10 accuracy, plus 8 crit, and 25% damage while guarded. The 25% damage while guarded is not that important. The guard lasts 3 of the Man-at-Arms turns, so it's like if you want to keep someone permanently guarded, you're gonna have to use guard something, guard something, guard something. You're gonna have to alternate between guard and something. And if you alternate between guard and command, that's doable, but it means that you're losing out on a lot of other potential utility in like Rampart, for example. So the last line of that text doesn't really matter. What really does matter though is 10 accuracy and 8 crit. So obviously this can stack up to 3 times on your other characters. So it can stack up to a point where you get plus 30 accuracy and plus 24 crit on your other characters. If you just use this command over and over again. And plus 30 accuracy and plus 24 crit is very, very powerful. That is huge because you are you're basically guaranteeing that 1/4 of the time your characters will crit alone with this skill. And they already generally have about a 1/4, or like some of the crit monsters in the game already have like a 1/4 chance to crit. So you're essentially raising that crit percentage up to a 50% chance if you use command 3 times in a row. And that's very consistent. A 50% chance to crit is very consistent. I like that. The sound of that is amazing. And obviously 30 accuracy means that you don't have to trinket or quirk for accuracy anymore. This skill is pretty good, but I tend to quirk and trinket for accuracy anyway, just in general. Because there's nothing really else to quirk and trinket for. And you can't always just bring a Man-at-Arms to every fight, so you end up having to quirk and trinket for accuracy anyway. But this can help you if you have problems with quirks and accuracy and whatever. And crit and damage. So Bolster. Bolster's his last skill. It's a 1 use per battle thing. Buff. It's a 1 use per battle buff, which means it's battle long. This buff is battle long, and it can be launched from any of the 4 ranks, and it gives plus 10 dodge and minus 20% stress to all 4 of the members in your party. This skill is probably one of the more broken buffs in the game. This is definitely the most broken buff in the game that's limited use. And the reason I say that is because minus 20% stress... okay, there's a trinket in the game called Book of Sanity, which gives minus 20% stress when you hold it. And it gives it to 1 character. And that's a trinket. That's a very rare trinket. So what that means is, when you use this with the Man-at-Arms, you are taking a Book of Sanity, and you're giving it to every single character on your team. So what that means is, you are essentially granting 4 people on your team a Book of Sanity each. That's you giving 4 very rare trinkets to your characters, without actually having to use up a trinket slot. And we haven't even counted the 10 dodge yet. 10 dodge is roughly evaluated to be between an uncommon trinket and a rare trinket's worth of value. So if you add that together, you are giving every single character on your team a very rare trinket and a uncommon trinket, at least, of power. That's insane. That's so much value in 1 skill. That this skill should almost always be run. This is a staple for sure. On the Man-at-Arms. It's not used often, but in boss fights, for example, or when you see a tough hallway fight, this is definitely the first skill you'll be clicking. It just gives you so much utility between being able to dodge skills that the enemies are throwing at you, so you take less damage, and being able to take less stress damage as well at the same time means that you're taking less HP damage and you're taking less stress damage, which means you're just so durable. You've essentially just patched up both of the problems in the game, HP and stress. Why is this skill so broken? I don't know. So let's just go over where we would use Bellow and where we would use Retribution. Fights with a lot of AoEs, obviously you want to click Retribution. That would be some boss fights like the Shambler and the DD1 boss of the Shuffling Horror. Likes to AoE you a lot. The Cultist Priest along the way that you find along the way in DD1 will also like to AoE you a lot, so Retribution is pretty good there. So you can see that Crush can only be launched from positions 1 and 2. So if you ever find yourself in a position where you're running a rank 3 Man-at-Arms, you can obviously unclick Crush and click Bellow. This is a very good set to use as well. This is a more utility-oriented Man-at-Arms, and this is very usable. The reason why I don't recommend rank 4, though, is because it disables Rampart, which is his best skill. So this is not ever a Man-at-Arms position I would recommend. Oh yeah, let's go over his camp skills. That's his next thing. Let me just fix this real quick. I just like to see my optimal set there. But right, let's go over his camp skills. So this one is a 4-cost self only plus 15 protection plus 15 damage. This is a terrible skill. It costs so much, and it only buffs his damage, which it doesn't really matter, because like he doesn't deal damage, so he's not very good at dealing damage, so you shouldn't really buff his damage. And it buffs his protection, which implies that this fight is going to be tough, and it's because you're going to probably get a lot of damage thrown at you, and you're using Defender, right? In that case, because you probably want to make sure your allies don't get hit with that heavy damage instead. And if you're using Defender so many times, you don't really need to use this camp skill, because one use of Defender is 2 uses of this camp skill. Is double the effectiveness of this camp skill. You don't need to stack prot that intensely. This is not a good skill. On the other hand, Tactics is insane. This is crazy in terms of skill value. For 4 battles, you're getting 10 dodge and 5 crit. 10 dodge being roughly evaluated as an uncommon trinket at least, and 5 crit being roughly evaluated at, we'll call it another uncommon trinket. You're essentially granting 2 uncommon trinkets to your characters for the next 4 battles. This is very powerful. This is a party-wide buff, and party-wide buffs like this, of this caliber, are literally only on the Man-at-Arms. This is probably the best camp skill in the game, with weapons practice following close behind, and we'll get to weapons practice in a while. Instruction, just always click this. Basically, what I'm saying is always click this. When you have a Man-at-Arms with Tactics, and you're camping, you should almost always click this. You should have a very, very good reason to not click this skill, because this skill helps a lot. Instruction, it's a 3-cost buff to 1 companion only of 10 accuracy and 3 speed. This is actually a very strong buff. There's a lot of enemies in the game which test you to see if you have a good accuracy stat, and sometimes it's very hard for characters of a certain level to reach that accuracy stat on their skills, or you might not have the trinket that buffs their accuracy to a good enough amount. So you could instead spend camp points to do that, which is a little sad, but you're not always guaranteed to get whatever you want in the game, right? You're not always guaranteed to get those optimal trinkets, yada yada. So it's nice to be able to guarantee accuracy through this camp skill. Examples of this are the Brigand Pounder, which would like for you to be able to hit the matchman at 100% accuracy with a Hellion. Hellion having low accuracy without the Heaven's Hairpin would love to be instructed by the Man-at-Arms. Also, having 3 speed on the Hellion is just insane. So this is a very good target. This is very good when you target a Hellion with it. Weapons practice. This is a party-wide buff again. Costs 4. All companions get plus 10 damage guaranteed, and they have a 75% chance to have plus 8 crit. Plus 8 crit is a rare trinket level of a buff. And plus 10 damage is roughly an uncommon trinket, I would assume. No, it's a common trinket. So this is a rare plus common combination to all of your party. Yeah, there's a 75% chance to fail, but this is worth clicking all the time. Just because of, if it doesn't fail, it gives so much offensive power to the person that you buffed. And if anything, it gives a stress healing component. These are both stress healing and offensive skills, party buffs, and that's insane. There's no way that, like, honestly, these are the best camp skills in the game, period. And you should always click both weapons practice and tactics if you can. You should have a very good reason to not click both of those. And instruction is very usable. You could easily spend 11 camp points just with the Man-at-Arms on your team. These are very, very, very good camp buffs. Some of the top tier camp buffs are on the Man-at-Arms. So these are the Man-at-Arms trinkets. His rare trinket is the Rampart Shield. plus 40%. Oh, named very aptly and correctly after the skill that is supposed to buff, which is plus 40% move skill chance, which is Rampart, and it gives plus 40% move skill chance, plus 30% stun skill chance, and minus 15% damage. This trinket is very, very powerful. Rampart itself is already an amazing skill in terms of stuns, and just putting 30% extra stun resist on it brings it up to 170, which brings it up to a point where it is above, very above average compared to other stun skills in the game. The move skill chance is very important for disabling 2 people, and minus 15% damage is not that big of a trade-off for Rampart. It's already dealing somewhat little damage anyway, that it doesn't really matter if you deal a little less. Definitely worth it to run. This is a very good trinket. I find my Man-at-Arms in the late games running this trinket very often. His very rare trinket is Guardian Shield. It's plus 10% protection if in position 4, plus 50% healing received if in position 4, and plus 10 dodge if in position 4. I really don't like this trinket, mainly because it incentivizes you to use a position 4 Man-at-Arms, and that disables Rampart. And it's actually not even that useful. The buff it grants is very tiny. We can just compare this to the Defender buff that we were just talking about, which gave plus 30% protection if you used it once. And you'll already see that using it once is already much more powerful than running this trinket. Units in position 4 also tend to not take HP damage, so this is not very useful. And this also, therefore, is not very useful, because if you don't take HP damage, you don't need to heal. And obviously, you're not targeted that often. So all 3 of these tags don't actually do much. So why does this trinket exist is the question. And the trinket exists because you can use it with guard. But I just kind of said why guard doesn't really need this trinket, because you already stack so much protection anyway with guard alone. You're never going to need 40 protection when you really just need, when you're never going to need 10 more protection than what you have already managed with Defender spamming. So this trinket, I do not recommend grabbing this. I do not recommend. I would sell this. I would actually sell this trinket, and I'd be very happy doing so. Right. So what are we pairing with the Rampart Shield? Right. So we were talking about how the Man-at-Arms has very low speed, and that's a big problem for him because being a slow stunner is not very good. So we don't have to really care about his durability because he has such high durability stats anyway. So what do we like to run on him? We like to run speed trinkets on him. Feather Crystal is very good. Berserk Charm is very good on him. Ancestor's Pistol also gives speed, I believe. Crescendo Box gives speed. Ancestor's Candles give speed. Any of these that I've mentioned are very, very good trinkets for the Man-at-Arms. Some of them might be better on other people, which is fine, but just having any extra bonus to speed is very good. Feather Crystal, which is the smallest speed buff that I would recommend running on him, is plus 2, which brings him from 5 to 7, which brings him to average speed, and that's good enough for him. Other trinkets that you can run him, this one's a little more niche. It's a Bellow-centric trinket. It's the debuff amulet you can run on him. If you're running a Bellow, rank 3 Bellow Man-at-Arms, you can use a debuff amulet to kind of guarantee that debuff goes off. But I find that a little too niche because you don't really need a lot of, like I said it before, you don't really need that extra debuff chance. Right, so let's talk about the Man-at-Arms positioning and partners. I said before he can work in any of the first 3 ranks. He's very flexible in in that sense. So let's figure out what do we want to run next to him. He's got stuns and he's got some poor damage dealing, and he likes to guard people. So he does get focused a little bit. So we would like a very dedicated healer, for him. Someone like the Vestal is very, very good for that reason. I find actually a Vestal plus Man-at-Arms core to be very, very powerful. They both have good stuns, serviceable stuns. They both have a good reach in terms of damage dealing. They both have they're both very good at one thing. They're both good at a lot of things, but they're very, very proficient at one thing. Vestal for keeping everyone alive, and Man-at-Arms also for keeping everyone alive. So you've got a very strong survivability in these two. And Man-at-Arms, he makes up for this lack of damage on the team, in that you're running 2 utility heroes more. by having OP camp skills for offensive things. So his 2 camp skills being very powerful is very, very important for his synergy with the Vestal. Other characters that can fill in this 2 ranks. Obviously, now we see that we have characters that are on either ends, and we have 2 spots in the middle. We can put in a Dancing Core. So we can put in a Dancing Core with a lot of damage potential to round it out. Potentially like a Shield Breaker or a Crusader. That's a good comp. It also has a Stress Heal. It's got Omnipotent Reach. This is a very strong comp. I don't see this comp losing to a lot of things in the game. I don't see this comp losing, period, actually. You could try this out. Other things you can do, obviously, are to have the Man-at-Arms in 2. And then he is a part of the Dancing Core instead. So you can have him be a Rampart spammer. And then have another person in rank 1. That would be the Hellion. This is a very good comp as well. Puts out a lot of damage. You've got a... in this kind of comp, you obviously want to run a Speed Trinket on the Man-at-Arms, just so you have a good speed differential between these two, so Shield Breaker can move forward, and then Man-at-Arms can move forward, so you don't disrupt your Hellion's ability to Iron Swan. This is a very durable comp, very strong. It's got some weaker units in terms of durability, but you can obviously guard her with the Defender if it gets hairy. Position 3 Man-at-Arms is not as used often, but I mean, it's a thing. You can definitely use it. He's more stationary, but obviously you can run a Crusader kind of core with him. This is a Dancing Core again, and obviously the same thing, right there with the same thing. You can also put her in front, him in front. I hate the leper. Oh, this is the wall. This is okay. We'll talk about the wall when we get to the leper. Right. So obviously, at the end of the day, in terms of generality, we just really need a healer that goes with the Man-at-Arms, and so Occultist works as well. This works fine with 2 backliners. Obviously, when you put an Occultist on a team, you kind of want an off healer. Arbalest works. This is just kind of getting back to the typical Occultist core comp. And obviously, you want like a stunner here, so PD enters again. Very classic. I think that just about covers it. That's the Man-at-Arms. Thanks for watching.